Okay, hello everybody, everyone.
Welcome to SPARTA Live.
In 2001. Hi, Jeremy.
Hi. We are very happy to have Jeremy Deller here today, and we will show you a lecture from September 2020, which took place in the Filmwerkstatt Düsseldorf. And afterwards we will have a Q&A session with you, Jeremy, and it will start at 7:15. So we are really looking forward to it.
Yeah. Where are you actually?
I'm in London in my apartment because we're not allowed to leave our home
At all?
Yeah, because London is like plague central at the moment. You know, I think we have the highest infection rate in the world currently.
Yeah.
So there's not really much happening.
Yeah.
But we can.
But we are really happy that you came to Düsseldorf in September and that we got your lecture. So,
yes, I mean it was the only time I left Britain this year almost. I was in Bonn once this year, and then strangely, so it's only been Germany I've been to. But yeah, that was 2 days. I was in Düsseldorf in September. It felt very exciting to leave the UK to travel.
Yeah.
And a lot of stuff happened after.
Yes.
But let's chat about this later. And
yes, we can talk about this.
Yeah.
Okay.
And now we're gonna start. So see you later.
Ciao, ciao.
Life, I would be giving a talk to a group of people in Germany about films that I've made. I didn't think this would ever happen, but what I'll do is I'll just go not quickly, but the 4 films that are here,
right,
which you may or may not have seen, but you can see tomorrow, and I'll show clips, but I'll try and explain how this fits into like a wider career, if that's the right term, as someone who's been making art for some time, and how it is I end up making films, not exclusively, and also maybe about the process of making a film as an artist, how different it might be from making a film as a filmmaker, making documentaries, and some of the problems, because there's definitely problems, or there have been, as I'll explain with one film in particular. So it's going to be quite casual, and I'll be showing some clips. Some of the clips might be quite long, because I just want to explain why I made a sequence in the way I did, how I used archive, for example. That's, for me, it's a really important thing, is the use of archive. Not least because as a young person, and still I watch lots of TV. I know it's probably very unfashionable, but I watch a lot of TV and a lot of documentaries on TV. And so in a way, if you grew up watching television, you became a real expert without realising in television and documentaries. If you watched a lot of documentaries on TV, you became a real connoisseur almost by accident. And in a way, that's what I am an amateur expert on television and documentaries on TV. There's a very famous, very, very famous documentary series in the mid to late 70s in the UK called The World at War, which was about the Second World War, and it was the first time a proper in-depth series had been made about the Second World War, and it was about 15 episodes, and was very, very well made, it was very interesting because in the mid-70s and late 70s, a lot of the men who were involved in the war were still alive on both sides. So Albert Speer was interviewed, British leaders, British generals, and so it was really the last chance to get these men to speak, and it was mainly men about their experiences, and maybe had a big effect on me, and probably a big effect on musicians at the time. I have a friend who has a theory about, I don't know if any of you know much about the band Joy Division, but they would have been watching the same series and looking at this imagery from the Second World War, and it probably influenced their view of the world, but also the songwriting and imagery they used when they were making records and so on. It has a very bleak feel, and this documentary series has a very bleak feel to it. very down, not at all celebratory about the national identity of Britain, because Britain as a country is still obsessed with World War II, and as you'll see in one of the films, certainly it's infected our view of ourselves and made us feel we're we're still fighting a war basically against Europe, all of Europe, not just Germany. So it's something that is really important. So this series called The World at War, I would recommend it very highly because of a kind of very simple, methodical way it told the story. Anyway, this is something entirely different. I'm going to talk to you about my early work and how, strangely enough, I made this diagram in 1996. And it was a way of trying to explain the world as I saw it, to compare the connections between acid house music. I might try and make it bigger. Wow, look at that. Acid house music and brass bands. So you understand the concept of a brass band. You have them in Germany, we have them in the UK, and they're very much associated with industry and an industrial culture and a kind of folk music in a way, like a popular folk music. And acid house music comes from America, effectively, but was very, very important in the UK, this dance music, electronic dance music. And so it's how do you connect these two musical forms? Especially because I was getting a brass band to play acid house music. That's why I made this diagram, and it's a way of justifying the idea. Without this diagram, the idea is almost a joke. But with the diagram, it has some weight behind it, it has some thought and purpose. Basically, what this diagram is trying to tell a story of 20th century history, effectively, through music. You begin with industrial culture, brass bands, and you end with the acid house, which is basically digital culture. But also it's really telling the story of Britain through music, through a social change through music. And I suppose for me, you can't, if you think about music and popular music, it's also a kind of form of history, and you can't disconnect it from history and from social history. So as a diagram, it's very helpful because it also shows how I think and how I connect things together. 2 years ago, I made a film about dance music culture in the UK, which is basically this diagram. It's more or less everything in this diagram is referred to in my film, and that's on show here. It's in this space, and I'll show you a little piece of that in a minute. So this is really a very important first image for a talk. Having said that, I will go even further back to ancient history now. We're going back sort of to when I didn't study art. I didn't go to art college. I studied art history, which is very, very different discipline. And I studied in a very traditional place in London. And I didn't have a art training. I didn't do art at school. When I was 13 or 12, I think I stopped painting and drawing. I was taken out of the class by the teacher. He didn't like me. And so I did other things. So I tried to make a show in my parents' house after I left university. Well, there's like 5 years I didn't know what to do with my life. And I ended up doing some paintings. These are paintings about Keith Moon, the drummer from The Who. But I took over the whole house. And this is obviously the bathroom, the toilet. And those sheets of paper you see on the wall, that's the graffiti from the men's toilets at the British Library, which is the most august, academic, old-fashioned library in London. It's moved now. It's where Karl Marx would go, and where he wrote the Communist Manifesto in the library. It's where intellectuals and academics through the whole of British history have gone and had their seat, and they go there and they apply themselves. And it was an amazing place. It's like a big domed building. It's a beautiful building. But the toilets, the men's toilets, the graffiti was absolutely disgusting and funny and pornographic and intellectually challenging. And so I wrote down the graffiti and made a book of all the things. And it's basically men, sexually frustrated academics and intellectuals writing about people, but also setting each other puzzles and games, having arguments on the walls with each other about philosophical questions. And so I made this book, and that went in the bathroom. So as you can see, I was just using my parents' house as a gallery, effectively. This has nothing to do with films, by the way, but it's just explaining how I work. And since then, I've really not worked very much in museums and galleries as much as other artists might do. Most of my best work happens outside galleries, I would say, or most memorable happens in the public realm or as a film, but it's not necessarily sort of artwork in a traditional sense. The diagram again. This is the brass band I worked with. At this point in 1996, it was an all-male brass band. They didn't allow women in the band. They do allow women in the band now, but they had a kind of strange logic about why they didn't allow women, because they said their wives would not let them travel if they knew they were travelling with women. That was their sort of logic. It's kind of works and doesn't work, but anyway, very traditional, very white male. Again, that's changed a little bit, but it's a very sort of traditional sort of form of music making, and heavy drinking before and well, mainly after the concerts, but not before. Really kind of industrial sort of style drinking and entertainment that they sort of provide. So they played acid house music. So when they did those concerts, they're playing clubs and festivals to young people who, now this music is history. Then it was still quite current in people's minds, but they were very, very popular. And I really like the idea of taking them out of their normal context into this new context. And it really taught me a lesson when I rang up the manager of the band and asked him if they'd want to play this music, which this is 1996. The music was still had a very strong drug element to it, or identification with it. I didn't use the word acid house because it still had a very negative connotation. I just said contemporary electronic music. And the manager of the band said, yeah, we'll do it. I didn't have to explain anything really or convince him. He just said yes. And in a way that taught me that working with the public is much easier than actually working with institutions and museums, and often curators sometimes even. The public, in Britain at least, are very interested in art and artists, and in a way want to do things that may be a little bit different and go on a small adventure, really. This was really an adventure for both of us, myself and the band. We didn't really know what to expect, and it became quite a big thing in Britain. There's a record, it was on TV, and it was just a lot of fun as well. And the band still perform this, it still happens. I see them occasionally, but I just let them play it. I don't want money for it or anything really. I just like the fact that they do it. So this was, for me, was important. Again, going back to the diagram, I could go into detail about this, but in a way it's self-explanatory. Where brass bands and acid house meet are in the middle. At that point it says civil unrest there, right in the middle, media hysteria. Mainly because brass bands in the 1980s became associated with trade unions, and as you know, in the 1980s in Britain, the trade unions came under very forceful attack by the right-wing government, and so they became, as a form of music, it became politicised, which it never really was before. And acid house music became politicised because young people were gathering in great numbers, they were taking drugs, all these things that the government hated. And they didn't like. It's basically about groups of people coming together to do something. If it's a union for an industrial dispute, or if it's young people to dance, to enjoy themselves, it's this dynamic of a kind of uncontrollable crowd, which the government is very unhappy with. So this is a club. This is in my film. This is the beginning and the end of my film has this club. The beginning of the film has people queuing up to go into the club, and the end of the film has this sort of very ecstatic dance sequence, almost romantic dance sequence, quite a long shot. And this is a still from the film as well. So I'm going to explain about the film and about sort of documentaries about popular culture for me. So I was asked to make a film about dance music in London, and I said, actually, there's no point doing it about London. Actually, London is really not interesting compared to the rest of Britain. Often the most interesting things happen outside London. And so I said, let's can I make it about the whole of Britain? It was being sponsored by Freeze magazine, had the money, but they'd been given money by Gucci. So there's a big budget. And initially I thought, is this good to take money from this fashion house to make a film? And then I thought, well, it depends what I do with the film. And they wanted shortish films, like 20-minute long film, about dance culture in cities around the world. So in the end, I made an hour-long film about a country, basically, and about British history. And it's a quite political film as well. And Gucci had they didn't even see the film until it was finished. And so which was quite interesting, really. They had nothing they gave me no guidance or anything, really. So I was very happy with that. This is a still from the film. So it's a film about Britain in 1980s, early 90s. And it's really about the connections between dance music and popular culture, but also history and politics. And what I knew I couldn't make is there's so many documentaries now about this moment in history or about punk music culture, and basically all those documentaries are middle-aged men, even older than me, if that's possible, sitting in a recording studio with all the kind of equipment behind them, talking about what it was like when they were 21, and just reminiscing and getting very nostalgic and making their own histories, basically. And I realised that you couldn't really make a film. You shouldn't make a film like that about this moment in history, and it would be a bunch of old men, basically, talking about taking drugs. Most of them forgot it anyway, because they were so, off their heads. So I just thought, what I'll do is, having said that, in the film, I'm in the film a lot, which is makes me very unhappy, but to see myself. But I basically went into a school in London and spoke to a group of 16 to 18-year-olds. That basically gave them a lesson on 1980s Britain and dance music. But it was like a history lesson or a politics lesson. And we filmed that over a day. So why it's different, there's a middle-aged man speaking, and that's me, but I'm doing it not in a way from necessarily personal experience. It's just how it was to be there then, but not in terms of what I did. It's about what it was about. So in a way, it's looking at something, this moment in British history, and taking 2 or 3 steps back and looking at it in a perspective of what was happening before, during and after in the country. But also, the audience for the film are these young people. And what was interesting was it was really their reaction to the footage and to what I'm saying. So they talk as well about their lives, but also about what they think about pictures of raves and people dancing. For them, the most striking thing is that no one has a phone and no one's filming each other at these events, and people are behaving in a way that they probably wouldn't, because they know someone would be filming them, and so social media has sort of really policed their own behaviour effectively. But also I wanted the audience, when you watch the film, to be aware of these young people. So you're seeing it through their eyes almost, not my eyes or your eyes. You're seeing it through the eyes of these young people. So it brings it to the kind of present day. I did this for a number of reasons, one of which was, by chance, I went to a school to give a talk. And I really like the young people. I really like these people because I gave a talk about my work, a little bit like this. And then I realised that if I went back and gave them a talk about Acid House, it could be quite interesting. Not least because almost 90% of these young people, their parents were not born in the UK. Their parents are refugees and asylum seekers, and they've come to Britain very recently from basically from war zones, a lot of them from North Africa and the Middle East and so on. So they've come from quite difficult circumstances, but also, because of that, their knowledge of the UK is very limited because there's no folk memory in their family of growing up in Britain or their grandparents growing up in Britain. So for them, they wouldn't know these stories that I was telling them because their parents were in Syria or Afghanistan or Libya or Chad or wherever they'd come from, or Kosovo. So in a sense, I was trying to explain to them about the complexity of life in the UK, that actually the UK is more interesting than you might think. And things have happened in the UK very recently which you might find surprising, basically. So that was a really important thing. What I'm going to do now is show you the trailer for the film. Okay, so so you see the trailer, and it's a classic trailer in that it's super exciting, and it uses one song throughout, but also the film isn't as exciting as the trailer, obviously. But let's see how this works. So that's your minute and a half kind of rush. Like I said, the film isn't. You couldn't make a film that was an hour long that had that kind of build to it. But it was really that includes all the elements more or less in the film. So the film discusses the miners' strike in the mid-80s. It discusses battles over land and people going to Stonehenge. It discusses ideas around deindustrialization and countryside, how the countryside is used, but then it's all through the lens of this music. And I made it, and it was shown. The BBC, I gave it to the BBC to show, and they didn't show it for like 9 months, and then they showed it, and it was very well received, and people really loved it. And now the BBC want to make a whole. I'm kind of boasting now. They want to make a whole series of films where someone goes into a school and gives a lesson about something. Not me, because I will never ever do that again. But it was. So we've got some. I've got some ideas about people that could go in. Have you heard of something called Bellingcat? Do you know this organisation? It's an organisation that does open source investigations. It does a lot into the poisoning. It works a lot with information about Russia. It identified the people that tried to kill the spy, the former spy in Salisbury. It does a lot about MH17 and so on. They identified the people who work in the book missile launcher that day. They'll probably work on the Navalny thing. Anyway, the guy that runs it, he lives in the UK. I want him to go into a classroom and talk to a group of young people about how they can use their phones as kind of a weapon, effectively, against disinformation and so on. So it's just things like that would be quite interesting, I think. So we'll see. But this film was something you'll see here. It's literally as you sit here. I might, if we have time, we can watch another clip later. I'm going to go on to the next film, which is a film that's showing on that monitor. Oh no, that monitor there. Yes, sorry. So this is a film about this photograph. Is like one of the most amazing photographs, really. In a sense, it's similar to the diagram. It's a photograph of this is a guy called Adrian Street. He's a wrestler, and this is him with his father. He went back to see his father in Wales, in this part of Britain where there's a lot of coal mines. He hated his father, hated the mine, hated Wales, hated everything about it. And at the age of 15, he was in the mine, and then he left home and went to London to make his fortune. And he became a bodybuilder, then a wrestler. And in 1973, after 10 years, basically, he returned back to the mine to be photographed with his father as a kind of a giant sort of fuck you to his father and everyone else, because he was making money and he wanted to show them how he transformed himself into this incredible creature. And I saw this photograph and I thought, this is incredible, because basically this is the journey. It's not only his personal journey, but actually it's the journey the whole country was taking at the time. Britain is not an industrial nation anymore. It's, you know, it is more or less post-industrial, or there's post-industrial towns. But he, in his body, he was enacting this change, going from an black industrial culture, effectively dirty culture, to this kind of shiny service, entertainment, industry culture that Britain, we like to think maybe in the UK we are, with this very kind of clean, we lead the world in fashion, music, art, all this kind of shit. So anyway, so this is, Adrian was making this journey by himself, under his own sort of steam, as it were. But also what was interesting was that he was doing it with this persona. He very quickly realised that if he dyed his hair and wore pink trunks and a little bit of makeup in the 60s, and he realised that people really didn't like this. Even though he was not at all gay in any sense of the word, he realised that if he looked nice and looked a little bit effeminate, it could make him more money, because people would pay to see him get beaten up, get hurt. And so it went more and more and more, and he became more and more grotesque almost towards the end, and outrageous in how he looked. That's a picture of him when he just left home, when he's like 15, 16, very good looking guy. He came to London, was posing like this for magazines, and he didn't realise actually that this was like a gay culture that he was sort of supplying images for, effectively. He thought it was like for magazines for people who liked bodybuilding, but actually these were more like soft porn, gay photographs. So his persona became more and more outrageous, even more so than this. He went to America when he was 40 to start his career again. And he just constantly has this absolute power of the will, basically, to succeed and to be egotistical. So I made a film about him, and it's interesting when you make a film about someone who, in a sense, is a very interesting character, but is not necessarily a likable person. He's not a likable person. I admire him, and I actually do like him, but he's not likable. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. You know, he's quite difficult. Also, if any of you have made a documentary and you have a subject and you ask a question, there's two things you don't want if they don't answer the question, or if they take 25 minutes to answer one question. If you're making a film that's half an hour, it's very difficult to work with that. And he would really just talk and talk and talk and talk about himself. He's incredibly egotistical, and he's only interested in what's like a radius of like half a metre from his body, basically. It's just himself. But he sees himself as a superhero, and he has all his issues with his father, obviously. His father was a very tough man, very hard man, beat him, and so the film is about that as well. But it's also about this transformational quality that he has in his life. This looks like a painting in a way. There's so many paintings and art equivalents. It's like The Prodigal Son. It's all these sort of art history references, just maybe where I use my art history from. But in a way, it's really, for me, he's like a character from the future. It's like science fiction. And if there's any artist that he, in a way, emulates, it's William Blake. I don't know if you know about William Blake, and this artist, this visionary artist, who wrote a poem called Jerusalem, which is almost like our national anthem, and it's a poem. It's a very interesting poem. It was never meant to be a song. It's now a song. And it's a poem that speculates what would happen if Jesus Christ visited Britain during the Industrial Revolution. What would he make of it? What would he think of what he saw? And it talks about wearing a golden cape and being on a chariot of fire, and being in the sky and being very colourful and bright. And in a way, this is what Adrian is. He is like this figure who's come from the future like a visionary character to show the industrial past what the future will be like. Having said that, when I talked to him about it, he just says, I just wanted to to say fuck you to my father. He doesn't see himself as a prophetic, visionary character, but that's fine. That's how I see him, and it helps me to like him actually. So I was having a real problem with this film. I'm going to show you the first 3 minutes. I was having a real problem with him. I worked with a really great editor. So this is the first 3 minutes of the film, the opening sequence. And basically, I was really struggling. I mean, this is sort of a kind of process issue. I was very much struggling with him, what to do with him, because he was talking so much. And then by chance, I went to see an exhibition about the Ballet Russe, about the costumes of the Ballet Russe and the culture of the Ballet Russe. And I picked up a CD, bought it, of ballet music. And then I realised, actually, I can use some of this music. It's perfect, because actually the music is much more eloquent. It says so much more than he can say about himself. He can talk about himself and talk, but it's actually not very interesting. But the music transports him into this romantic fantasy figure, which is what he lives. He lives in a kind of fantasy of himself, like he's in the film of himself. So if you're in the street with him, walking down the street, he'll say hello to people thinking they know who he is, because he still thinks he's famous. So he's sort of deluded in a way, but I realised that yes, he lives in a kind of an ongoing film or performance, basically. It's a kind of piece of performance art, his life, effectively. And so if I used the music, it would accompany this sort of performance that is his life. So this is the first 3.5 minutes, and it's a piece of ballet music, and I didn't even know the title until later, and it's called Echo. It's a Narcissus looking at his reflection, which is absolutely perfect, because this is what he does continually. He always looks at his reflection, and at the end of the film you'll see him working out, and he's on a treadmill, and he just has photographs of himself on a slideshow that he's looking at on the treadmill as he's running, as he's walking towards himself. He's 71 in this sequence, and he was still fighting a little bit, wrestling a little bit. He lived in America at this point, but he's still a really tough guy. He's really short. He's shorter than me. He's really short, but he's really tough and scary. He's always scary. And so, at the end of the film, if you watch the film, you'll see him on a treadmill, walking towards himself all the time, looking at pictures of himself. This is kind of insane, but let's start this. This is a poem he wrote.
I could be a tulip, I could be a man. The only way of knowing is to catch me if you can. You may suppose what you want to suppose, but I'm a sweet transvestite with a broken nose. I've got to be royalty, my blood must be blue. I'm king of the ring and queen of it too. Have you ever seen muscles on a rose? I'm just a sweet transvestite with a broken nose. I'll kiss you or I'll kick you, that's what I like the best. I'm as tough as Marciano and as sexy as Mae West. I'm as cute as Shirley Temple and as fast as Bruce Lee. I could kill a man, eventually. If you're a he, you're it, you'd better answer my calls. I'm like King Kong with lipstick. I'm like Fay Ray with balls. I wear mink and sable when the cold wind blows. I'm just a sweet transvestite with a broken nose. This will be somewhere in the region of the 15,000th time I've walked out in front of an audience. I'm actually making my own personal history tonight because I've wrestled in 7 different decades, 2 different centuries, 2 different millenniums. At 16 years of age, I'm walking in the ring for the first time. It was like an unbelievable dream come true. I couldn't even feel my feet touching the ground. I felt like I was walking on a cloud.
Adrian Street has just come back from Africa. And he's got quite a tan on him too, as colour set owners will notice probably. That is not makeup.
If I'd been born in a different age, like 1,500, 2,000 years ago, something like that, I would have been a gladiator. I would have been a Roman gladiator out of choice. Not because I was a slave and made to. That's what I would have loved to have done. And the thing is that professional wrestling, it wasn't just actually fighting somebody and bettering somebody that appealed to me, as all that did, but it was dressing up to do it.
So, yeah, quite a character. I don't know if you heard him when he was speaking in the changing room. That was one of his last ever fights. But he's not modest. He said, "I've been fighting in 7 decades, 2 centuries, and 2 millennia." I mean, he sees himself as this epic character. He's not shy. In a way, and he had some strange political views. I mean, very odd. I mean, it's quite interesting. He was showing me, this is something I'm actually quite interested in. He was showing me, for example, a map of the world, and it said the world now, and then the world in 20 years, and it would show where Islam was going to be in all these different countries around the world. I mean, this is 10 years ago. People were making this sort of strange sort of propaganda, anti-Islamic propaganda, and he was kind of believing it. And he was just reading about the UK from this right-wing newspaper, this Murdoch newspaper called The Sun. So he had this totally twisted, weird view of Britain because he was reading this one newspaper. But he said he would never come back to the UK, but he's back in the UK now, and for 2 reasons, I think. One of which is he's basically a climate refugee because he was living in Florida, and he said to me, the weather was becoming so extreme. It was either storms or heat waves, and he just couldn't cope because his house was getting damaged every year by storms and floods, or it was too hot to go out. And I think also maybe because of ill health, he knew he could have free treatment in the UK. So he now lives in Wales, very close to where that photograph was taken. So in a sense, it's almost worth making another film about him, of him back in the UK. He goes to the gym every day, spends hours in the gym, does all the stuff, because he basically wants to live forever. That's what he says to me in the film. He wants to be immortal. So we're sort of halfway through. So this is really the most recent film I've made. It's downstairs. Luckily it's subtitled in German. I'm going to show you a big chunk in a little while. And it's basically a film I made in London, in Parliament Square, which is just obviously like the Reichstag. It's the equivalent of the Reichstag, effectively. And all through last year, we were having these huge discussions and debates in Parliament about the Brexit bill, about changing it, about delaying it, about stopping it, even though we'd made the vote. And it was just chaos in Britain, political chaos. And outside of Parliament, on certain days it was chaos as well, because people who were pro-Brexit and anti-Brexit were like meeting like this, right kind of nose to nose, which is very unusual, because usually with a demonstration in Britain like this, it would be one side, not both together in the same space. And I went to have a look, and this is the first thing I shot there, and I just could not believe what I saw, just the chaos of people together with ideas flying around, screaming at each other, the noise, the visuals. It's very un-English in a way, and I just could not make sense of it. It was very disturbing. So this guy, for example, was standing outside an office, shouting inside at people who were coming in and out about being traitors to Britain and so on. And I realised, so I just stood around and spoke to these people, and other people, but I tried to try and sort of get in the minds of the people who were unhappy about the situation and who wanted to leave the EU, because I know the arguments for staying in the EU. I know exactly why. I know, because I know all my friends are like this. So I wanted to go and talk to the other side, as it were, and see what they had to say about it, what they had to say about the EU, the kind of information they had, where they were getting their information from, what they thought about Britain, about national identity, often, like I said, they'd speak about World War II was like the really big thing, but would nearly always would be referred back to would be the Second World War. So I was just trying to get into the minds of people who I share a country with, but I share virtually no ideas about Europe with, and to see if there's any common ground, and if there's anything you could do with this information that I got from them in a way. So it's quite a chaotic film. There's no resolution. The last part of the film, as you'll see, is a rally, a pro-Brexit rally, which ended up being a far-right rally in the centre of London. I've never seen this thing before. It's very unusual, full of conspiracy theorists and so on. And people now who are probably anti-vax, anti-mask. And so it was a really shocking but fascinating experience to see Britain sort of disintegrating, or kind of unity within Britain disintegrating. I shot it in a very low-key way because a lot of people are very, very suspicious of the media. So I went with a friend who is actually even shorter than me, guy, who happens to be Jewish. Not that that stopped anyone being anti-Semitic in general to him, not to him, but about Jews in general. There's a lot of anti-Semitism on the right, as I'm sure you're aware. I don't have to tell you that. But it was quite interesting because the left was having a big problem with anti-Semitism as well at the time. And so we just spoke to people, like this guy was at every event, always filming, always live on Facebook or live on something. Super conspiracy theorist, a lot about paedophilia. I mean, you know, this group Q, you know, this is kind of pre-Q in a way, but people obviously listening to their ideas and filtering it into like a British context. But, so in a way I made a film about white radicalisation, which has been going on in Britain for about 25, 30 years. It's not new. The press, the right-wing press, especially Rupert Murdoch's newspapers, have been anti-Europe for a long time and have always been making up stories, basically. So this is the sort of chaos, this kind of Bruegelian scene, if I can use that term. These are the people that were there every day, and they were like trolls in real life, walking around. You'd have the pro-Europe people, usually relatively quiet, standing there with the European flags, and like a group of 6 guys would go around and just scream and shout at them, and would be really mean to them, and then would leave. And the police would follow them around and make sure they didn't break the law in any way, and they were very close to breaking the law, but didn't quite break the law. So I'm just going to show you some stills. This is a great guy. This was a Marxist who was basically, he was there just for fun, to like watch it and talk to people. He didn't like Europe, but he didn't like the far right, so he was in the middle, and he just said, this is why. This is because of the rise of Trump, the financial crash. This is what happens. You get this kind of chaos and uncertainty, and you'll get, that's why Brexit's basically happening. I mean, he was a very calm voice. These are some of the people that would go around and sort of harass other people. They're kind of conspiracy theorists. Well, I spoke to one of the women in the wheelchair, had a long talk with her about her children. So there are moments in the film, and you'll see this will actually be, you'll see this in German, where I just, you pan, you're at a demo or something, and you pan a crowd, or you see someone, I always wish that documentary filmmakers would stop and say, what is that flag? What is that tattoo? What's happening here? And so that's what I did when I made the film, especially with this man, but also with some insignia that people had, sort of Generation Identity, insignia, and other fringe groups. But this guy had the most insane tattoos all over his arms, probably all over his body. A lot to do with numerology and the Bible and conspiracy theories, and then terrorism, football, fascism. It's a strange sort of selection. He was definitely someone who was interested in like a war against Muslims as well. He has a Knights Templar T-shirt, which is the, sort of the knights that went off on the Crusades. And as you'll see, there's other references to that. So then there were moments like this, with these young people who were there and who'd been racially abused, who were just talking to people, these young Asian kids. It looked like a really moment of clarity in the film. That's something totally different, which we'll talk about in a minute. But I'm going to show you a sequence. It's probably about a 7 or 8 minute sequence. It's from the middle of the film, and it goes into the far right rally. So it starts with about a few days before the rally, and then it has this rally. It's quite long. It's about 8-9 minutes. That's okay, though, isn't it?
May I ask a question? Is the material shot all 2019?
Yeah, or over 6 days, but not the same, not consecutive days. I think we went 6 times.
Same period of time.
Yeah, but by the end, my cameraman was like so freaked out. You know, he was like, "I can't go back to those people, man." I mean, I understand that. I mean, he took it personally, being a kind of Jewish guy. But what was interesting was because we were both 2 short, white guys with like not a great camera, we could really get in and talk to people. As soon as they saw like a BBC crew with like a boom mic and an production assistant, they were just screaming and shouting. So often it helps to go in very simple. You'll see in the second half of the big kind of fascist day, as I will call it, I just used a stills camera. We had a 4K film mode, and I was just filming like this. So you go right in and you do stuff. And the quality, I think the quality is fine for what it is. You don't need super high quality when you're making a film that is so chaotic and unresolved as this. I think you can use different styles, different cameras. There's like 8 different cameras in this, 6 different cameras in this film. The opening shot is from an iPhone, you know. So it's fine, I think. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start the film up and just scroll to it. I'm going to show you like some grim people. Okay, this will be this in a way. This woman I'm going to show you, the blonde older woman, is sort of the most terrifying character in the film, because she's someone like my mother or our parents, who has been her brain has been absolutely scrambled by disinformation, absolutely turned upside down, and her mind is like scrambled eggs basically, because she just talks nonsense. And so as you see, when she starts saying these things, I have to put some graphics up because she's so certain about what she believes is totally incorrect. And in a way, for this woman who comes from the countryside, comes from like this lovely cathedral town in the west of England, I don't know what the equivalent is for you, for her to have been, her mind to have been captured by disinformation and by Russia Today is really scary, because if it happens to her, then it must be happening to hundreds of thousands of people, because she is so normal and average, but full of hatred. And so this is really one of the most sort of frightening moments. And then talk to young people, and then someone who's like a conspiracy theorist, and then it goes into like really crazy conspiracy theory land. But it's about 8 minutes. Enjoy it. It's a lot of fun.
I despair. This wall of rhetoric we must break through is high. It has proved an effective weapon in this civil information warfare.
I've come all the way up from Somerset because I feel so strongly about the betrayal that's happened by our MPs. That's why I'm here.
It's quite a strong word, betrayal. I mean,
it is.
Yeah.
She's kicked Brexit under the bus yesterday.
Yeah. Did you feel that before yesterday as well?
Yes, I did. This is my 3rd time here, and I've been to 2 other rallies as well. I feel so strongly about this.
Yeah. Could you explain this phrase here, believe in Britain? What does that mean to you?
It means support British business, support British employees and employers. We stop moaning about the EU all the time. We do 6% of our trade is done with the EU, 6%. 94% of it is done through WTO already. You know, all this cliff edge and dropping out and crashing out, it's nonsense. We're an entrepreneurial nation, and whatever you chuck at us, we deal with it. except for this lot who can't.
This is the question I've asked everyone: is what do you think about the media in Britain?
Terrible.
In what way?
Biased. They don't tell you the truth. They doctor what they do tell you. But thank goodness the social media and RT. I watch RT quite a lot, but even they're trying to stop them broadcasting on YouTube.
So for RT, what do you watch on that? You get your news from RT?
Some of my news, I get it from all sorts of places. But yes, and their documentaries are very, very informative, and they're about all sorts of things across the world.
The reason you voted to leave, obviously,
yes,
quite clearly.
I wasn't alone. In my constituency, we had an 83% turnout, and 74% was for leave. It was huge.
And what reasons were they? Just simply?
I think we've had a lot of influx of Polish people in the area. Our local town is now become called Little Poland, because you get off the bus, you walk around the shops and you don't hear English spoken.
And where is this?
Yeovil in Somerset.
And that clearly is something.
And a lot of people are not happy with that. You know, when you can't hear your own language on your own high street, there's something amiss.
What are they doing in Yeovil, the Polish people?
I don't know, to be honest with you. I really don't know. But they aren't the ones that are homeless. They've all been housed in social housing.
Are they is it agricultural? What is it? Just trying to think what happens around Yeovil.
Well, there's a cheese factory. They're probably in there.
Right.
There's also Bridgewater Morrison's have a big clearance warehouse up there, and they employ only Polish people. They don't employ English people.
So you're very worried for Britain?
I am seriously worried, yeah. When I think what my parents went through with the Second World War and all the grief that they went through over that, and then we just chucked it all away.
We were racially attacked.
Tell us what happened.
Okay, so basically, we were singing this chant down there, and where they were fighting, and this old lady told us that to go back to our country, and I was just like, normally people say this, I actually don't get hurt, but I actually got hurt by that, because I was born and bred here. I'm from Manchester, I'm from London as well. Like, this is racism.
Our nation too.
It's our nation too. Like, we might be brown, but we are British too. Not everyone who's white is. I'm a British Pakistani, so we need to express that as well.
Have you ever protested before?
No.
We are now.
We are now, and I've enjoyed it so much. It's like been an amazing day. Yeah.
What do you like about it?
I like the fact that people actually come up to you and actually want to talk to you. The people are actually getting involved. I never thought that would be so much involvement. Like, there's actually people coming in, bringing the community together.
Have you had any good discussions?
Yes. So many, and people are just so nice.
Are you worried about the future of Britain and your role with it?
Of course we are.
Yeah, it affects us.
It's our future too.
We're the people that are living in this afterwards. Everyone's going to die away.
We're the youngest. Did you find after the vote at all that people became more racist to you?
Yeah.
Yes.
100%.
Yeah, definitely. Because they saw they got their way out of it with the vote, so they thought they could express their racism. Now that the country's leaving the EU, they could be more openly racist, because that's what the people wanted. So they thought.
I've actually heard so many people's opinions, and there's change happening. Yeah. So yeah.
The change is coming.
Change is coming.
The change is coming.
He's so famous. Come on, say something.
Hi, I'm Femi. We're here outside Parliament. Brexit is falling apart, and everybody can see that. Even people who voted for it absolutely hate it. Let's get a new vote.
Get young people more involved. Yes.
Exactly. Our future, our choice.
Yes. It's our nation too.
We are part of the Yellow Vest movement that started back in December, and we're a peaceful movement. We shout, we sing, we chant. We're all friends, we haven't got the infighting. We're not far right, we're not racist. We want freedom, we want justice, we want respect. They're things that should be every single woman and child's and man's right. That you shouldn't even need to ask for it, but we do. We want that vote, that big, big vote that was a once-in-a-lifetime vote. We want it respected.
I've noticed that a lot of the shirts that you wear had stuff about veterans' rights on it.
Yeah.
That's sort of a big issue.
Yeah, it is. For me, I'm here for two reasons. I'm here for my grandchildren to have a better country to grow up in. They're both black. So for me, there's no race involved here. This has nothing whatsoever to do with colour, and I cannot emphasise that enough. I'm here for Brexit because I feel that is what gives them the best chance. I remember the days before we were in the European Union, and I believe those were better times. I think the country's lost their faith in what England can do, and we've certainly seemed to be losing our backbone. The veterans, the suicides, the homelessness. How can the government sit back and watch that happen and build new properties for refugees? My son has had to leave London because he can't get housed in London.
It's quite common, isn't it?
He's under 35 and he hasn't got any children. But if he goes out and procreates everywhere and has loads of kids that he can't afford to pay for, they'll give him a flat so that he can have his kids over the weekend. It's not right. The system at the minute doesn't work. It doesn't really work for anyone.
What do you feel, this is a question I've asked everyone, what do you feel about the way the media has been covering all of this?
Well, they call us far right. And funnily enough, I read on Facebook last night, somebody put, at the minute you've got the right wing out. You keep calling us far right, but come the 29th, you'll really see what the far right are.
What time is this all kicking off?
that's, I mean, you could make a whole film about this guy's body, couldn't you? Really. I mean, if I'd have been braver, I would have spoken to him. But what you don't know there is there's very loud music being played, and I didn't want that over this footage. It was just really horrible, kind of pumping techno, and it couldn't cut to it. But I would have spoken to him. But he was a really scary guy, actually. I don't know if you notice, when he looks at my camera, I kind of go like that, because I'm looking through the viewfinder, and I kind of pull back a bit. But yeah, maybe the best film to be made with this is to actually go befriend these people and then go home and see where they live and how they live and what their kind of life situation is, and try and kind of work out why it is they become like that, what happened to them. Do they really want to be like that, or is it through circumstances or whatever? But that's a long-term film. That would be like a 2-3 year project, I suspect. But there is more. I don't know if you want to watch more about it. We go to Depeche, we go to the last film. What do you think? There's one insane conspiracy theorist after this, which we could look at, and then I could go to the Depeche. Yeah. Let's just see.
You break the England flags of fibre, where your colours were pride. It's only the trophy, go great, it's the trophy. Love the Trump. All of fibre now. All of fibre now. Breaking flag of fibre. Fibre now. All of fibre.
So this group, do you know Morrissey from the Smiths? He wore a little badge with this insignia on for this group recently on American television, and it was like a really big deal in Britain, you know, with certain people, because he's been supporting far-right groups, far-right figures for years now. But this group is like a really fringe one, but he's basically a kind of far-right character. He's become one. He probably always was, but so that's, I should have added that to the text actually, that he supported them. So the next guy coming up is this conspiracy theorist, and it's kind of funny in a way, because it's just so, it becomes layer upon layer of conspiracy, and they're relatively harmless, but maybe he's not harmless, you just don't know. But it's just the most, you really need to read the subtitles. If you can't read them, I think you should try and read them at this point, because it's so complex and confusing. Could you put that bottle down just so it's a bit clearer? So, yeah, and this is the one, this has actually really disturbed me. On the day itself, I spoke to one person, and I spoke to this guy you're going to see next. And after that, I didn't speak to anyone, because it was so disturbing, really, what he was saying. And so mad, and I mean literally insane, but I couldn't really speak to anyone else. And I spoke to him just by chance. It wasn't because he looked insane or whatever. I just asked him about a flag, and you'll see this kind of conversation he has with me about this flag.
Fibre! Great big England flag of fibre. Brexit! No! Brexit! No! Brexit! What do we want? No! What do we want? Brexit! What do we want? No! Brexit! What do we want? No! What do we want? Brexit! What do we want? No!
Can I ask you what your flag is?
It's the King's flag.
The King of what? Of England?
Flag.
Is it like an ancient flag?
No, it's England's flag. It's King's flag.
Did you make it up, or was it?
No,
is it
no,
quite
it's
famous?
the King's flag before the Queen reigns.
Right.
It was the King's flag.
Okay.
That's why it's called the United Kingdom, not Queendom.
I've just never seen it before.
Right, what it is? That's the St James's Cross.
Yeah.
And then you got the 8-pointed 4 stars in the corners.
Right.
And then you've got another cross in it, which is for contracts.
Right.
And then you've got the black lines around it, which keeps Satan the pirates out.
Okay.
It's actually called the United Tribes of New Zealand.
Right.
Okay. So when it's the United Tribes, it means we're a tribe, we're all tribes. Yeah. So what the flag is doing is uniting all 250 countries. First used in 1834 with a contract between Queen Victoria and the Maui.
Okay.
And in Easter Island, you've got the Easter Island head, and the guy who's got the deeds for it is Hawawa John Wanoa, had the court case on the 10th of December in there and proved the fraud that's going on in there, along with the fake bloodline. So we're ready to put the new king back into power on the original bloodline, which will give every country back their status. Ireland will become Ireland, not Northern Ireland and Ireland. Will become a full country.
So who will be the king? Who is the bloodline?
It's Ernest Augustus III. He lives in London,
right,
and he's here now. But there's been a banning order. He can't speak about it. So now it's up to our Navy now to go in and clean the building out, and to remove the bloodline and put Augustus into place. And then the truth of everything of all these hundreds of years will be enlightened to everybody, and you'll have abundance in your pocket that you will not have to worry about the women again. But you will want to work because you want to keep the economy going.
Sure.
But everything will be yours. No gas, no electric, no water, nothing to pay for. Now, we've got a company called the Maui Powerhouse, and it's hydrogen energy with turbines put into the water that produce hydrogen that we can screw into the house to use your energy, or screw it into your car.
Thank you.
It's a good, I'll tell you, I'll go look it up. It's
I will
really
do.
interesting.
I will do. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.